Part 1. The Warning Signs in Jack's Hands. Jack Thompson had always been the kind of man who paid attention to the big stuff. His job as a retired mechanical engineer, his garden in suburban Pennsylvania, and his favorite Sunday morning crossword puzzle. He'd never been one to fuss over little aches or minor discomforts. After all, wasn't that just part of growing older? But one Tuesday morning in early spring, something changed. Jack was brushing crumbs off the kitchen counter when his right hand suddenly felt strange. Not painful, but oddly numb, like it had fallen asleep. Except he hadn't been sitting on it or holding it in a weird position. It wasn't both hands, just the right one. He flexed his fingers and shook it out, thinking maybe it was a pinched nerve or poor circulation. But the feeling lingered, dull, detached, like he was wearing an invisible glove. That wasn't the only odd thing that week. On Wednesday, Jack was trying to repot a houseplant when he dropped the ceramic pot. It smashed across the tiles, soil scattering across the kitchen floor. "Clumsy," he muttered. But deep down, he knew something was off. His grip had been firm, or at least, he thought so. It was as if his hand didn't respond as quickly or precisely as he expected. By Thursday, the problems grew harder to ignore. Jack sat at his desk, trying to write a birthday card to his sister. His handwriting, usually neat and even, looked shaky and uneven. He struggled to form simple letters. The pen slipped, and the line spacing was all over the place. "What the hell is going on?" he murmured. When he tried buttoning up his shirt that evening before going out to dinner with his daughter, he fumbled with the buttons like he hadn't done since he was a child. The coordination just wasn't there. Zipping up his jacket wasn't much better. His fingers didn't seem to move the way he wanted them to. By Friday, Jack started to feel cold, only in that same right hand. It wasn't cold in the house. The rest of his body was warm, but his right hand felt like it had been dipped in ice water. He ran warm water over it, rubbed it, even used a heating pad. No difference. That hand just wouldn't warm up. The final straw came Saturday morning. Jack reached for his coffee mug and realized he couldn't feel the ceramic handle. It was like touching something through thick winter gloves. The texture, the pressure, it was muted, almost non-existent. He stared at his hand in disbelief. He hadn't injured it. There were no cuts, no bruises, no swelling. Later that day, while watching television, Jack noticed something else. His right hand had developed a faint tremor. It shook, ever so slightly, even when he wasn't doing anything. He held it still and tried to control it, but the shake persisted. Not like Parkinson's, he thought. His father had that, and the tremors were different. This wasn't rhythmic or persistent. It came in waves, unexpected and uncontrollable. It was time to say something. When his daughter Emily came by to check in that evening, Jack finally opened up. "I've had some strange things happening with my hand," he told her. Emily listened carefully as he explained the numbness, the clumsiness, the shaky handwriting, the cold sensation, the coordination issues, and now the tremor. Her face tightened with concern. "Dad, this isn't something to ignore. We're going to the hospital first thing tomorrow." Jack protested at first. He wasn't one to rush to the doctor, but Emily insisted. She even pulled out her phone and started reading articles aloud about how the brain controls movement and sensation in the hands, and how sudden changes in just one hand might be a sign of something serious. That night, Jack didn't sleep well. His mind raced with possibilities. Arthritis, nerve damage, carpal tunnel, but none of them seemed to fit perfectly. And one word kept popping up in Emily's articles: stroke. The next morning, they went to the hospital. The neurologist, Dr. Karen Wells, asked Jack a series of detailed questions and ran several quick tests, checking his grip strength, asking him to close his eyes and identify objects by touch, and observing his coordination. Then she said something that made Jack sit up straight. "These symptoms in your hand might be early warning signs of a stroke, Mr. Thompson, particularly an ischemic stroke, the kind caused by a blocked blood vessel in the brain." Jack's heart sank. Dr. Wells explained that strokes don't always come on suddenly, like people imagine. Sometimes the brain gives subtle warnings. And because the brain controls the movement, sensation, and coordination of the hands via the nervous system, a stroke affecting a particular area of the brain could cause very specific symptoms in just one hand. She pulled up a simple diagram of the brain, showing how certain parts, especially the motor cortex and somatosensory cortex, are responsible for controlling the hands. If a blood vessel supplying this area is narrowing or blocked, the brain tissue starts to suffer from lack of oxygen, she explained. That's when these unusual symptoms begin. Emily leaned forward. So this could be a small stroke already? Or a warning that a bigger one is coming? Dr. Wells nodded. Exactly. What we call a transient ischemic attack, or TIA, can cause these warning signs and usually resolves within minutes or hours. But it's a serious red flag. It means a full-blown stroke could be on the way if we don't intervene. Jack was stunned. He'd always associated stroke with things like slurred speech or face drooping, not hand symptoms. But now it made sense. All the strange changes in just one hand were like the brain's way of tapping on his shoulder, urgently trying to say something was wrong. They scheduled an MRI and carotid ultrasound to check for blockages. In the meantime, Dr. Wells gave Jack a clear set of instructions. Monitor his symptoms closely, stay well hydrated, rest, and avoid any stress or exertion. She also adjusted his medications, adding a low-dose aspirin and a statin to reduce his stroke risk. Later, as Jack sat on his porch with Emily, sipping tea instead of coffee and staring at his right hand, he said quietly, "I had no idea a hand could tell you so much." Emily smiled, brushing a leaf off his shoulder. "It's your brain talking through your fingers, Dad." Part 2. Connecting the dots. The week after Jack's hospital visit was filled with new routines, phone calls, and medical tests. Emily helped him navigate it all. She drove him to appointments, made sure he followed the new medication schedule, and gently reminded him not to brush off his symptoms. Jack was beginning to realize just how much he had ignored his body's warning signs over the years. The numbness in his hand, the tremor, the lack of coordination, it all made sense now. These weren't random quirks of aging. They were clues, evidence that his brain had been struggling and trying to communicate. Dr. Wells called 2 days later with the results of the MRI and ultrasound. "There's a partial blockage in one of the arteries supplying the left side of your brain," she said. "It's not a complete occlusion, but it's enough to have caused temporary issues, possibly a small TIA, like we suspected." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "How close did I come to a full stroke?" There was a pause on the line. Then Dr. Wells replied, "You were lucky. Very lucky. Many people don't get a warning at all. You got 7. That sentence stuck with Jack. He'd had 7 warnings, 7 subtle, progressive signs that something was wrong in his brain. If he continued to ignore them, it might have led to paralysis, permanent disability, or even death. Later that afternoon, he sat down with a notebook and started writing. Not his usual gardening notes or household tasks, but something more personal, a list. He titled it, "The 7 Warnings I Almost Missed." Underneath, he wrote each one out in careful detail. Numbness in one hand, not both. A strange, detached feeling. Dropping objects frequently. Even simple things like a cup or pen. Unsteady handwriting, where the letters looked shaky and uneven. Difficulty with fine motor tasks, buttoning shirts, zipping jackets. Abnormal temperature sensation, like his hand was unusually cold. Loss of touch sensitivity, especially with textures or surfaces. Uncontrollable tremors, even when resting. As he stared at the list, he realized how easy it would have been to blame each symptom on age, arthritis, or stress. But taken together, they painted a much clearer picture. Over the next few days, Jack decided to make some changes, not just to his lifestyle, but to his mindset. First, he joined a local stroke support group that met every Friday at the community center. It was run by a cheerful retired nurse named Linda, who'd had a minor stroke herself years ago. The group included people of all ages, some recovering from strokes, others there to learn how to prevent one. When Jack shared his story, especially the warning signs in his hand, several people nodded. One man said he'd experienced similar symptoms, but didn't get help until it was too late. Another woman said her stroke had started with tingling in her fingertips, but thought it was just a pinched nerve. The stories were sobering and powerful. It was in that group that Jack began to fully understand the science behind what had happened to him. Linda explained it simply. The brain is like mission control. Every movement, every sensation, starts there. The hands are especially sensitive because they're used for so much: eating, writing, dressing, feeling, holding. That's why when something goes wrong in the brain, the hands are often the first to show it. She described how a blockage in a blood vessel, often due to cholesterol buildup or a blood clot, can reduce the oxygen supply to parts of the brain. When those brain cells don't get enough oxygen, they start misfiring or shutting down. And if that part of the brain controls the hand, well, you start seeing changes. Jack asked, "Why didn't I feel anything in my face or speech?" "Good question," Linda replied. "Because the blockage might have been localized to the part of the brain that controls fine motor movement on one side of the body. The motor cortex is mapped. Different parts control different body regions. You had symptoms in your right hand, so the left motor cortex might have been affected. If the blockage had been elsewhere, you might have slurred speech or a drooping face." Jack nodded slowly. It all clicked. The brain and hand were more connected than he'd ever realized. Back at home, Jack began incorporating stroke prevention into his daily routine. He cut back on salt and red meat, started taking slow evening walks, and learned simple hand coordination exercises. He also began writing with his left hand, just a few lines a day, to build neurological resilience. Emily bought him a set of small clay balls used in physical therapy, which he squeezed while watching the news. But most importantly, Jack talked. He talked to his neighbors, his friends from church, his barber, even the mailman. He told them about the signs to watch for, especially the ones no one talks about. "Did you know," he'd say, "that if one hand starts acting weird, getting numb, clumsy, or shaky, it might be your brain's way of telling you something's wrong?" People listened. Some raised their eyebrows, some laughed nervously, but many thanked him. A few even said they'd been experiencing strange sensations and were going to schedule a checkup. Emily joked one evening, "You've become a walking PSA for hand symptoms." Jack smiled. "Good. Maybe it'll save someone's life." His own doctor was impressed, too. At Jack's follow-up, his blood pressure was down, his cholesterol levels had improved, and his coordination was gradually returning to normal. He still had occasional moments of hand fatigue, but the numbness and tremor had mostly disappeared. More importantly, his mindset had changed. "You're taking control," Dr. Wells said. "That's half the battle." One Sunday, about a month after the first symptoms appeared, Jack attended a health fair at the community center. He helped set up a booth titled, "Your Hands Can Talk. Listen before it's too late." He brought along a chart he'd made showing the 7 signs, a brain diagram borrowed from Dr. Wells, and pamphlets about stroke prevention. Emily helped him design a simple handout with the title, "When One Hand Speaks, Your Brain is Calling." Throughout the day, dozens of people stopped by. Jack spoke to everyone who came, patiently explaining how even minor symptoms like hand numbness or a tremor could point to something serious. He encouraged them to get regular checkups, especially if they had high blood pressure or diabetes. He urged them not to dismiss symptoms just because they were subtle. "You don't have to fall down or pass out to have a stroke," he told one man. "Sometimes, your hand just starts dropping things, and that's your first and only warning." By the end of the fair, Jack was tired but deeply satisfied. He had turned a terrifying experience into a mission, not just to protect his own health, but to educate others. That night, as he sat on the porch under the setting sun, Emily joined him with 2 cups of herbal tea. "You're not just getting better, Dad," she said. "You're helping other people do the same." Jack looked at his right hand. No tremor, no numbness, and smiled. "That hand scared me, but now I think of it as a gift. It told me the truth before it was too late." Part 3. Lessons in the Palm of Your Hand. 2 months had passed since Jack Miller's terrifying wake-up call. Life had settled into a new rhythm. He was still attending the stroke support group every Friday, walking every evening with Emily, and diligently managing his blood pressure. The tremors had vanished. The numbness in his hand was now just a faint memory, something he could hardly believe had once frightened him so much. But perhaps the most profound change was in how Jack thought about health. He no longer viewed aging as a slow surrender to fate, but as a daily act of attention and care. His body, especially his hands, had become like a trusted partner, sending messages, giving signals, even raising the alarm when something wasn't right. One afternoon in early spring, Jack stood in front of a group of seniors at the local library. He'd been invited by Linda, the support group leader, to speak as part of a community health seminar called Silent Alarms: What Your Hands Know Before You Do. Jack adjusted the microphone and looked out at the small audience, maybe 30 people, most of them around his age. A few were taking notes already. Others looked tired or curious or skeptical. He understood all those expressions. Not so long ago, he might have worn them himself. "Hi, everyone," he began, smiling warmly. "My name's Jack Miller. I'm 73, retired, a grandfather of 2, and an amateur gardener. I'm also someone who nearly had a stroke and didn't know it." The room quieted. I didn't fall. I didn't lose my speech. I didn't collapse or faint. All I had was a hand that started acting funny. He held up his right hand. For a few weeks, I kept dropping things. Couldn't button my shirt very well. My handwriting got shaky. Then came the numbness. Just in this hand, not the other. I thought maybe it was arthritis or sleeping wrong. But it wasn't. He walked slowly across the room. What I didn't realize was that my hand was trying to tell me something about my brain. The part of my brain that controls this hand wasn't getting enough oxygen. A blood vessel was partially blocked. I was having a transient ischemic attack, a TIA, a warning stroke. He paused, letting that sink in. I was lucky. I caught it in time. But many people don't. Jack then clicked to a slide showing a simple diagram: a brain, a hand, and the nerve pathways in between. The caption read, "When your hand speaks, your brain is whispering a warning." He continued, explaining each of the 7 signs in plain language. Numbness in one hand, not both. Because strokes usually affect one side of the brain, and each side controls the opposite hand. Dropping things. It's not just clumsiness. It's a loss of fine motor control. Shaky handwriting. Your brain is struggling to direct precise movements. Difficulty with buttons or zippers. You might think it's arthritis, but if it happens suddenly, think again. Strange temperature feeling in one hand. The brain can distort how you feel touch and temperature. Loss of touch sensitivity, as if you're wearing invisible gloves. Tremors that aren't Parkinson's. Parkinson's tremors usually affect both hands and happen at rest. Stroke-related tremors may be one-sided and come with other changes. Several people in the audience began scribbling faster. A few looked at their own hands thoughtfully. "Now, if you notice just one of these things, maybe it's nothing," Jack said. "But if you notice more than one, especially if it's just on one side, go to the doctor. Go now. Don't wait. Don't explain it away." He shared how fast things moved once he sought help, and how getting a CT scan, MRI, and starting treatment early probably saved him from a massive stroke. "Because if I hadn't listened to my hand," he said softly, "I might not be standing here today." After his talk, people came up to him with stories. One woman said her husband had lost coordination in his right hand months before his stroke. Another man admitted that he'd recently been fumbling with buttons and hadn't thought much of it. Jack handed out flyers he'd printed himself, each one listing the 7 silent hand symptoms you shouldn't ignore. At the bottom, it read, "Listen to your hands. They just might save your life." That evening, back home, Emily helped Jack pin one of the flyers to their refrigerator. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said. "You turned something scary into something useful." Jack smiled and touched the flyer. "It still gives me chills, thinking how close I came." Emily turned serious. "I was terrified. You didn't show it, but I saw it. You were scared too." "I was," Jack admitted. "But I think fear can be good if it makes you act." Over the next few weeks, Jack kept spreading the message. He got invited to a local radio station, wrote a guest column for the town newspaper, and even filmed a short segment for a YouTube health channel for seniors. In the video, he sat in his living room, calm and clear. "My name is Jack Miller," he said, "and if you're watching this, I want to tell you one thing. If your hand starts doing things it's never done before, pay attention. You might not feel sick. You might not look sick. But something could be wrong inside your brain. He described each of the 7 symptoms again, slowly and with care. The video ended with him saying, "You've got 2 hands. If one starts changing, dropping things, going numb, trembling, don't ignore it. Go get checked. It might be the smartest decision you ever make." The video went mildly viral in local senior communities. Nurses and caregivers shared it. Churches played it during health fairs. A stroke specialist from the regional hospital called and thanked him personally. By summer, Jack had become something of a local advocate for stroke awareness. He never sought the spotlight, but people were drawn to his story, his calm, matter-of-fact way of turning something invisible into something clear. One warm July afternoon, Jack received a handwritten letter. It was from a man named Harold, a retired truck driver from 2 towns over. "Dear Mr. Miller, I saw your video and recognized 3 of the signs you talked about. I didn't want to believe it, but I went to the doctor anyway. They found a blockage, just like yours. I'm now on blood thinners and making changes. I might have never known if not for you. Thank you. Harold T." Jack folded the letter and sat in quiet gratitude. As summer turned to fall, Jack continued to live life fully. He volunteered at the community center's wellness program. He and Emily planted a small herb garden in the backyard. He kept writing in his journal, sometimes just random thoughts, sometimes new tips about hand symptoms he was learning from doctors or fellow patients. But there was one message he kept coming back to, writing it again and again in different forms. Stroke doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it arrives on tiptoes, through your fingertips. He'd lived through that truth, and now he was making sure others would hear it before it was too late. Conclusion: Jack Miller's journey started with something so subtle, a few dropped spoons, a missed button, a trembling pen. Most people would have shrugged it off, but because he paid attention, acted quickly, and sought help, he turned a near tragedy into a second chance, not just for himself, but for others. In a world where stroke often strikes without warning, Jack's story reminds us that sometimes there is a warning, and it might just be in the palm of your hand.